discussion. But to answer the big question, we'll answer some of the detailed questions. So I've just written up here the basic skeleton of that little mini play. So what was the first starting position? Side sitting. Side sitting. So, yep. So let's go through the features of side sitting. So tell me, what are the legs doing? Can we come a bit closer? Actually, I shouldn't say it like that, can we? Of course you can. Will you? All right, I'm trying to monitor my own language as much as I was monitoring your language yesterday. Because now, why don't we say, can you do this in an ATM? Because the answer to can is yes or no. All right? And we actually don't want to know a yes or no answer to our questions. We want try, you know, so you invite them to do it. And the other thing, of course, is say if you say, I want you to, the answer to that is fuck off.
Yes, sir.
Right? Because I'm not going to do what you want me to do. I want to do what I want to do. So, or it might be, oh, yes, ma'am. You know, so you get one of the two. If you say, I want you to, then you'll get a rising in a few people. Some people either say, well, I'm not going to do what you tell me to. I don't care what you want. This is about me. Or they'll go, oh, she wants me to do this. I better do it. Do you see what I mean? So it's not about what we want as teachers. So you might think that sometimes we're actually quite bossy the way we give instructions, but it's actually better. That's fine. If you've set up an environment where it's, you know, these are the instructions, you have a crack within the parameters of, you know, ease and going towards pleasure and stuff like that, and that they can choose not to if they want to, then it's just an instruction that they can make a decision about because it's a bare bones instruction. Does that make sense? It hasn't got all this loading about I want you to, or could you please, for me, darling, put the bins out. You know, it's not that kind of thing that's going to invite some emotional response. Clearly, putting the bins out is a bit of a thing in my house. Any other about that? No, sorry, don't worry. That was a tangent. I don't want to invite other people on my tangents because then we'll all go down a rabbit hole. Oh, no. So, starting position. Legs are already tilted, folded. So, yep. So, they're tilted and folded. So, we're asymmetrical. Then, and what else? And why is the yep. And floppy. So we've got stability but relaxation at the same time. And and the support of the left hand. Okay, so why those things? They're the three main things. Why? Why not? Is that what someone said? Cheeky. Did someone say that? Or that was just my inner voice? Is it inner voice?
It asks something of your pelvis and your whole side.
Yeah? You're just putting it out there to see if anyone bats it back, are you?
Oh, no, I don't.
All right. All right, how about you'll sit in that position and see? It's a stable base and it allows rotation. Yeah. So why have the legs like this? So what can the pelvis do in this position that it can't do as easily in, if say you were in Taylor sitting, so if your legs were symmetrical, go do the difference. It's what Anastasia said, right? Can you feel that it's much easier to rotate your pelvis, rotate around your sitting bone in this funny, obviously rotating in one direction, allows that hip to lift. Exactly.
And it is one of the positions of the bigger movement.
So that's the relationship back to the bigger play. Thank you, Shakespeare. Yeah, so this is a cunning position where it affords you the opportunity to move your pelvis in a way that's going to be good for the big picture, which happens to be rotation. Proximal movement. Very good. Proximal relative to the fixed distal. So, yeah, the knees provide a fixed distal point. Very, very, very excellent. Coffee. As if I need more caffeine. Oh, my Lord. All right. But I do. That's not need, it's want. We know the difference. So that's one. So, and interestingly, it's a pretty wide base though, right? So we've got this interesting, almost a paradox where we've got a wide base of support. So we're actually very stable with this proximal mobility. It's actually unusual. Normally we think about fixing up our pelvis for stability, right, and things move around it. So it's actually quite paradoxical. So the nervous system is already a bit peaked by this. So now and what tells us this is, if you hark back, and Fran and I were kind of alluding to it, is that there's a lot of ahas in this lesson. Do you remember what your ahas were? When you realised this point, exactly this point that you're making, that actually your pelvis is free to move. Because most people, when you teach this lesson, they don't know that their pelvis is free to move. And the first, well, not the first necessarily, the first big aha, but one of the biggest ahas is when that right sit bone picks up. Now, if someone hasn't actually learned to pick up that right sit bone, you've just had the aha, haven't you? But do it, right? Can you go back to when your pelvis was stuck to the floor and you turned? So stick your pelvis to the floor and turn. So that's how most people do it. Without, yeah, your pelvis is already lifted. Sit, yeah, sit on your bum. It's all right. Don't be sorry. Be defiant.
Freeze your pelvis.
Freeze your pelvis on the floor. Yeah. Now, if your pelvis can't come, that's how people. When you teach this, has anyone taught this?
Really, really limited. Crazy. Couldn't believe it.
For you or for the people?
Just watching, I was like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So that they'll just turn their head or something, and you know, everything. Yeah. So Fran and I still somatically remember when our pelvis is lifted off. Both, you know, that's what we're talking about. Because you can't, when you realise that the pelvis can lift off and rotate around itself on that left ischial tuberosity, you think, why didn't I do that before? That is the moment of my self-image was not complete. Right? I just had it in my self-image. My pelvis is my stability point, and it's fixed to the ground. Right? So this is liberation, and you know, especially, well, maybe I don't know. You guys can tell me that I'm not right, but I think for women, moving their pelvises freely is sort of, maybe it's my generation as well. You know, it was pretty revolutionary to have a very free pelvis. I started this quite early, put it that way. So, okay. All right, so we've got a why and in a way a how a little bit, because the how is around the proximal to distal flip. That's so interesting for this movement. It's interesting for the brain because it's not the way the brain normally thinks about things. What else? So the starting position, so we've got this hand here. Why? Support, yeah. So it makes it even more stable. And, yeah, it gives that point of stability. And again, it's this proximal moving over distal. Again, which is exactly what you're demonstrating. Feel that? Feel this turning. So now our hand is weight bearing. So in kind of motor control language, our arm is now yoked into being a weight bearing thing, which actually is quite familiar to us, right? You know, from a developmental point of view, you know, we started out weight bearing through our arms. So it's kind of taking us back into that. And now we're getting this, and we're getting this ability to turn around ourselves. So what does that afford us? What has to move in order to turn around that hand? Shoulder girdle. So you're moving the chest relative to a relatively, so in a way you can imagine that the scapula and the supporting arm are kind of fixed, and now the barrel of the chest rolls around it. Can you feel that? Just shut your eyes and do it, and feel the barrel of your chest rolling around the scapula. So it's a very, very delicious proximal to distal, potentially, for some people. Yes? Do you find it? We find your vest delicious, Jane. So you could rotate. You could rotate your vest around your fixed arm. Yes. See, that little person could rotate around towards the arm. That would be delicious. It's a maypole. Your arm could be a maypole. Right. Are we clear about that? So now what was the sort of language around why would we want the chest to move relative to the scapula? What's happening in our self-image there? I know, I'm doing that horrible thing where you have to guess what the words are in my head. Go on. You're differentiating your scapula from your chest wall. Yeah, exactly. So, for people who don't know that they've got a scapula, because that's the other thing that I was saying to Fran, that was an aha for me as well. Like, oh, I think I said that out loud to the group, right? So so when we use this word differentiating, in my head, what we're actually doing is saying to the brain, you've been treating this you've been moving me around as if my trunk and my scapula and my arm are all the same thing, and they're not. They're different things to each other. This is my arm, this is my scapula, which my arm is different to, and this is my chest, which if I freeze my scapula and move my chest around my arm, they're different, differentiating. They're different to each other. It doesn't mean to say they can't all play together, but they are different to each other. Right? And then you start getting the permutations. Okay, so they're the sort of main things. And then the head and the trunk are whatever. Now, why is this arm up? Partly, yes. Yes. So I'll say it again so we don't do the box. It's up to create a reference point for your eyes. It constrains, everything together. So Larry has a fit. You know, have you met Larry yet? No. So Larry's theory is a constraint always is a triangle. This is a virtual triangle. Like this would be the triangle because it's closed, right? When you've got a triangle, you freeze the movement. So we create a virtual triangle by saying your eyes stay with your hand. So it's a virtual triangle. It's actually, whatever. What it does is effectively freezes. It makes some joints disappear, which is the opposite of differentiating. So it actually makes this shoulder girdle disappear. It makes my neck disappear, right? Because if I'm saying that this configuration has to stay, I've constrained these body parts to stay in this position, that's what a constraint is, then there's no movement anywhere between these things, so the joints have disappeared. Now, actually, constraints are very cunning because mostly what they're doing is recapitulating what we do all the time. So I've just said, if I didn't know I had a shoulder girdle, I'm actually living with a self-imposed constraint. Yes? So what Feldenkrais does is, okay, if you're going to do it, I'm going to make you do it even better. I'm going to make you constrain it and hold it and restrict it even more. Now, he'll do it very cunningly because if I've frozen all this, constrained it, i.e. made it disappear, so it's disappeared in my head as well, but the instruction is to turn, what happens? I integrate. I have to find somewhere else. So I have to go together. It forces me to move somewhere else. It forces the movement somewhere else. So a constraint will shine the torch on some other part of you. The understudies. Yes. Yes, exactly. The ones that you don't necessarily know to move. And what are the understudies in this situation? The pelvis over the femurs, which is the hip joints. Yes? Sort of, but the instruction in this one is to not move your trunk. Yeah. So when he teaches it as in the ATM book, there is absolutely that. And then he'll go back and differentiate them. But in this one is actually, I reread it because he says, take the trunk and the head and the arm all together. So it's the whole trunk. Now, what is the trunk is a different question. This drives me nuts. Don't work with biomechanists because they'll say the trunk is just the chest. I think the trunk is the trunk, but there you go.
I feel like it's also a way of not having this dragging behind jumping going around as well.
Yeah, so this helps. Yes, helps with orientation because it takes the whole caboose around. Yeah. It always feels like a caboose to me. A carriage.
The last carriage in the train.
Guard's van. This kind of carriage out. Caboose. English. I had to think.
Sanskrit.
Sounds French.
Sanskrit.
Right, yes, yes.
Does that also, that configuration also change where your how your centre of gravity is on the pelvis? To me, that a lot of that stuff, if you're not very mobile, you're inclined to lean far too much.
I'll say it again. Yeah, so Danielle's asking if you have, so I'll paraphrase. So what Danielle's demonstrating is if her hands are both back, that would be a big constraint, like because you'd have to move really proximal to distal, like this. That's all you could do with your head. So this means everything can, all this stuff can come around this point. So it really makes the centre of rotation this arm. If you just had the arm dangling, do it. Just have your right arm dangling. So it's passive, which is actually what you did in the Uber play, right? The first up, you just turned and your arm just carried along. And then, remember, I changed instruction and you changed the kind of instruction to the arm where instead of just being being passively lifted off, it not only lifted off, but it carried itself around you more. So this actually is in between those two things. So it's not being passive. It's not actually increasing its speed relative to the trunk to give you some momentum. It's simply freezing everything. Yeah. So it becomes part of that. So in my self-image, this is a unit that moves around this joint. Deborah.
I get the feeling that the reason why the hand is hanging.
Oh. Wake up, Trish. Oh, yeah, good. They'll teach you for looking down and being reflective.
The reason why the hand is hanging rather than straight.
The hand?
If it was straight, it would be directing the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And there'd be more power in the hand and it would be leading the movement.
Yes.
Where like this, it's a reference point. You're not getting much power into it and you need to move the rest of the body to get it around. That was my feeling.
It's a good counterpoint, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. Does everyone agree that that's a good reason why the hand is dangling?
Because you tried it to really,
Yes.
it's directing it.
Yeah, good. Try it. Good point. Try it, everybody. Try with your hand really full of will. Stiff, active, lively. And then allow your hand to drop and feel. Just do it with your eyes shut and feel the change in tonus through all of you, right? There's a tonus thing in feel in your upper arm, feel in your shoulder girdle, feel in your trunk. So when our hand is really active, there's an overflow back into the system. And the intention becomes in here, doesn't it? Yes, I think that's very useful. All right, so there's method in this dude's madness, isn't there? And then again, I can say that's completely arbitrary, but it's arbitrary for a very good purpose as well. Yeah. All right, so I think that's the starting position. And we've worked out why he's got these things in. So some are constraints. And you could even say that having the legs like that is a constraint because it forces the movement into the hips. And when I say forces, it's not, yes, facilitate, thank you. Yeah, it invites, gives the opportunity, creates the environment for. It forces you to move in your hip joints. You either do it or you die. Okay, so then the first move. So I tried to stick faithfully to what he did because he didn't do that reference movement first with the eyes shut. He just said go around to as far as is comfortable and stay there. And then afterwards he says shut your eyes and do it and see how far you can go. So I would encourage you to do that eyes shut business first. Why? I think it's obvious. You named it for what it is. Sorry? Yeah. Well, yes. Yes, watching others is not a good thing. And with the eyes shut, that real insistence on you making an internally assessed decision around where you are not prepared to go further. So you have to set that one up fairly carefully when you're teaching. Is you don't say go as far as you can because people will go to the end of range. People, especially people like me who are hypermobile, because that's where I know where I am, right? You know, so you have to be careful not to say go as far as you can. You say go as far as is comfortable. Now, what are the quality things you looked for? What helped you decide that's far enough for now? Wasn't that you got to the end of your range, hopefully? Breathing, so your breathing changed. You started noticing you held your breath. How did you hold your breath? Yep. So there's a change in the timing of your breath. So people do it and notice, how do you hold your breath in that situation? Because this is important for you to understand there's many ways of holding your breath. You can simply not breathe, but there's something tightens. But there could be many things that tighten. And you start to differentiate the things that tighten. It's different in different situations. How do you hold your breath? Anybody? Yeah, so what does that feel like? Yeah, so you can get a feeling in here, right, of this kind of bracing. Are people familiar with that? Because some people don't know what that feels like. They don't do it, right? This is your data set. What else? Pelvis stops. So you might be actually tightening your abdominal, the whole girdle might stop. Right, so yep, so integrated for you. So it could be a really generalised holding of the whole pelvic girdle. What else?
Ribs.
Yeah, how do you do that?
My bottom ribs just stop.
Uh-huh.
And then I can still move, but when they stop, so my breathing.
Yep, so you hold your bottom ribs. So that could be those little muscles in between the ribs. It could be the muscles below. It could be the ones above. Who knows? Yep. So something else, so something stays still and others keep moving. Yeah. So you don't know where you are. Yep. And does anyone close off in their throat to hold their breath? Silvana, what does that feel like? Yep. 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 Okay. Right. Yep. Yes. Yep. It's even bigger. Breathing bigger. Oh. Tightening up here. Yep. So yes. Yep. So that the breathing changes in a different spot. Yep. All right. So there are lots and lots of ways that people will hold their breath. Either completely, they'll just hold it and they'll close off here, or they'll close off here, or close off everywhere, or it will change and it'll be bigger somewhere else, right? Or yeah, the eyes start to jump.
Inside the head.
Inside your head.
You know, you go to the. He
can't talk without his hands. He's Italian.
Like you're going into the movement and just don't go no further.
So your head just says no.
Yeah, it just says. For me, it is okay. I don't want to do the whole thing like that. You know, I want to do a small movement, and it just okay. That's enough for now.
Okay.
Do it smaller.
And why? Why does your system say that's enough for now? Do you argue with yourself?
I want to get the whole movement.
Ah.
I want to get the whole movement, but I don't want to do it all right now.
Okay.
I just want to play around in there.
Right. And there's something about in there, your brain makes a decision that this part is where you want to play. And
yeah, I can go further if I want. There's no problem with that.
Yeah, all of you can. Yeah.
But I just want to stay there.
Right. And it's really interesting for you to keep asking yourself, why here? Like, why is this the place I want to play around with? Because it's your comfort zone.
I think also that I'm looking while I'm in that spot, I'm looking.
Yep.
It might sound funny, but I'm looking inside at my brain.
Yes, yeah. So you get a clarity. So I think what you're saying, maybe I'm wrong, is that you're making a decision where you can see clearly inside your own self. Yeah. And if you go further, you will feel like you can't see as clearly. So you know from this clarity, here's where I want to work.
Just stay there.
Yeah.
For a while.
Delayed gratification. Oh, I'll repeat it.
Get me back. Who wants it?
Okay, we can, yeah, look, and there's heaps of motivations. Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to get you to tease out. Of what are your definitions of the comfort zone? How do you know comfort zone from non-comfort zone? How do you know quality from when you're compromising? That's what I'm trying to get you to talk about. So I think we've dealt a lot with breath. So how that might feel, where people might close off here, in the gut, in the ribs. Yeah, the whole neck might freeze. You might clench your teeth as part of holding your breath. Your eyes might get tight as you hold your breath. What else?
Just following on from what Pat was describing,
Yep.
for me it's like floating, 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 and then I get to a point where I have to, if I go further, I have to think about how I would go further. It's like I have to think, and that's
Right.
when
Okay, so that's your
something's
experience of ease, is floating, floating, floating.
and then I have to like figure out something.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
when
That's really, you're not so much paying attention to tonus as paying attention to almost a cognitive process. So see how many things there are. When you say to somebody, are you staying in quality? These are very, 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 very broad range of things that people experience to help them, that make them decide this is quality and I don't want to go further, I'm not ready yet, or I'm not interested in that yet, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Bruce.
What I tell everybody to do when they're doing these movements is to go as far as comfortable. If they feel that another muscle group is going to start to activate to help with that movement, then that's the point where they stop. Because you've got your breathing, but also the muscles. I think you get to a certain point of ease and then the flexibility's gone and your muscles will kick in, other muscles will kick in to help you around to go further. So that's sort of the point where your limit is comfortably.
And that's what you feel? Is that your experience?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how I would translate that is that in order to do any spiral movement, and this is why Feldenkrais uses circular and spiral movements so much, is what he is after is what I call this handing over of the baton smoothly from muscle group to muscle group. So if you think about to do a circular movement, so if I want to turn my arm like this, I have to start off with, let's say, this front muscle that lifts, and then as I come up, it's got to change the next set of fibers, and it's the changeover. If the movement is smooth, passing the baton to one group of fibers to another is smooth and you don't feel it. So I would slightly change your language about when you feel another group of muscles, because the brain actually doesn't think about groups of muscles. It doesn't, right? It thinks about movement and it thinks about sequencing and the timing of the muscles so that they integrate. As one finishes working, the next one's ready to work. Now, if one stops working too soon and the other one doesn't kick in straight away, you get a jump. Right? Or if one keeps working and the next group are working a lot, you'll get a co-contraction and you'll get a freezing, right? So it's the transition around the whole group of muscles that makes circular movements, spiral movements very, very informative about how your brain can sequence muscles. So if you want to know the secret about why do we keep doing spirals and circles, it's because we get this fabulous feedback about our ability to sequence and about our ability for muscles to work, slowly fade in, fade out, let go, let the others in. So I hear what you're saying, and I think that's the right track, but we've got to get rid of this idea. And I give you the idea, we've got agonist and antagonist. This works or this works. It's almost never an and or. It's this and then the passing over business. I mean, this is and or. But how often do we do this kind of movement in FI, in ATM? That's and or movement, right? That passing the baton. Yeah. Yeah, so that anytime when you get the rolling movements are fantastic because it's that idea all the time. Well, the baby rolls. You think how many circles and spirals do we do in ATM? All the time. For that reason. I mean, for all sorts of other reasons too. But when you get that sequence right, that's elegance, right? Isn't it? You know, that sort of flow. Yes? Does that make sense to people? Okay, so that's when we're talking about tonus. You know, we can think about this on-off business, but it's actually this grading up and grading down and handing over responsibility beautifully with this timing. This is very cerebella sort of stuff. You know, our cerebellas would be like cauliflowers on steroids after an ATM. Beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. Because we get that feedback of feeling that. And what it feels like is seamless. Yes, that's a bit of a rant, but there you go. It's your fault, Bruce. Okay, so I think that's a lot of information about how quality might be experienced or the lack of quality might be experienced, or when you have to push through something, you have to push through thinking, or you have to push through a resistance, or you're not interested, or you get lost, or you're not interested in that bit, you're just not, you know, this kind of knowing business, all right? Good. Okay, so we've found our limit, the so-called limit, and it's important that your audience knows that we're not after the absolute mechanical limit, because otherwise you'll have people who are used to yoga or something, and they'll go to their mechanical limit. You know, or used to going to physio who says, how far can you take your arm up? Because that's what they want to know. They want to know end of range. That's not what we're interested in. So you really need to think very carefully about how you sell this idea of them making a decision about a quality parameter, not a how far. Is that clear? This is a mission. This is really hard. Because you'll have to be their brake sometimes, don't you think? Okay, so next instruction. So, the instruction for the first, so what was the first thing that he asked us? So you go to the left as far as is, sort of comfortable. Let's just use that language for now. It's shorthand. And the first thing that he asked us to do? Eyes to the right. Why? Differentiate the eyes from the head movement. And what did we decide differentiating is? Sorry? Making them separate. Yeah, it's reminding the brain, hey, dickhead, your eyes are different to your head. Like, it's really nice for them to go together, and most of the time they are kind of soft-wired together. That, you know, that's very useful. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to watch, we wouldn't be able to perv, right? Because perving is eyes and head locked together, right? So there's a reason why they're soft-wired. Yeah, you wear those. Yeah. See, now we're talking. Oh, then you wear those RAF glasses. You know, what we used to call the dirty old man glasses. You know, the mirror glasses. You can't see what people's eyes are doing. They're doing that. So that's differentiation. Again, neurologically, you're saying to your brain, look, yep, very happy for them to work together. They can work apart as well. You know, like this is good marriage counselling, isn't it? Yep. You are two separate things.
You've got the movies together.
Yes.
Or one of you could stay at home. And
yes.
Someone can go to the movies alone.
Yes. That's right.
The other person stays home.
Yes.
Goes with somebody else.
With the neck. Oh. Yes. So it's this kind of individuating thing. So it's reminding the brain that these two things are separate and together at the same time. Very good. Okay. So we turn with this, everything else stays and the eyes are differentiated out, and that's good. And in this instance, he takes them opposite. So back to the right to differentiate them. Now the next move is the head going, in this instance, the head goes to the left. So it goes more into the movement. Yes? Do you remember that? Yeah. You thought I just made a mistake, didn't you? That's what he said to do. So what he's showing us there is that to differentiate, you can go either direction. So the opposite movement is very useful. The head, but in this instance, taking the head away, the eyes stay there. So we're still differentiating the eyes and the head. Now the head is differentiating from the trunk. Does that sound like a good idea to you? Did it work? Yep, so another way of differentiating. So he could have done that. And it could have worked as well. Try the difference. They're not hard and fast rules, right? It's just, he was just introducing a little bit of...
This is where people do stop breathing.
Right, this is where people stop breathing, is Fran's comment. Yeah. So you could differentiate the head. So keep your eyes on your hand, and you can take your head to the left a few times. Now keep everything there, and now keep your eyes on your hand and take your head to the right a few times. We did to the left, which was opposite. So for some people, one will have a bigger influence than the other. What he's just saying is, so I think when this lesson is in the ATM book itself, everything's differentiated going away from the actual direction of the movement. So he differentiates it back again. So you've got all that double range. Whereas this one, it's quite unusual that the head goes more into the left. That's okay, right? Can you feel that it's still differentiating? Yes? No? Yes, but you could say the same for the eyes. Whereas the eyes, he made the eyes go back to the right. Yeah, that's true. Yep.
And I mean, if I move my eyes that way, it doesn't feel like there's any further connection down to here, whereas it does when I move here.
Yep. Yep. So because it's not. Yep.
Here kind of makes it feel like this is going to get involved.
Maybe. Yep. So play around with these things. There's no hard and fast rules about this stuff. And in fact, sometimes when he's differentiating like this, a lot of those turning, if you do one of those little chair ATMs where you get people to turn and turn and turn and do this, sometimes he will send everything going back the other way, one at a time. So there was Fran's comment about the couple going to the movies or not. I remember Edna. She was our mother figure in our training. We were doing a lesson once, and she said, see, I pinched the marriage counselling from Edna, really. She was saying, no, just imagine, you got your head and you got your shoulder. And actually, I added this in because I just saw some people doing something a bit weird. So let's say we've got, the partners in the relationship here and here, gender not specified. So one can go towards the other, and the other one can not care and just stay still, right? Or this one can go away from this, and this one doesn't care. So think about all these different permutations. This can stay still, and the head can go away, or it can go towards, or they can both stay still, right? Or this can be away, and this one can go more away and towards. Or this one can be away, and this one can go more towards or more away, right? So the head's got three positions, towards, neutral, and away. The shoulder's got the same, neutral, towards, and away. And you go through all the different permutations of how those two things can relate, right? So they can both go away from each other. They can both come towards each other. They can both stay still. And then they've got all these, like one can chase the other. Do you see what I mean?
Or they can both stay together and go to the movies together.
That's right, and never be apart. And you look like a codependent, is what you look like. Inseparable. Oh, God. Yeah. So that's a really useful way to think about these relationships, is there's many permutations, and when you can choose to do one or the other, or any of those, how many would there be? He's good at maths. How many permutations? The 3 positions and 2 to relate, probably 9. 3 times 3. Is that math? Yeah, something like that. Or go away and do the maths. Write them all down. Anyway, just think about that. I have always found that really useful. So when I'm giving an FI, often I would just run through quite a few, as many permutations as I can with people, because it really messes with their heads. Like, you know, you really start to clarify the nature of the relationship by doing that. Okay. All right, which is actually what I did with you, because some of you, the instruction was, so this is the next one, a slight change of position. So everything else is the same, but instead of having the dead bird, you've got this. So what does this do? Constrains the shoulder and the neck. So that really with this one, so you turn, you've still got the movement happening hopefully in the hip joints, because we have said that. But having here, then we ask you to, so the position itself makes the neck disappear, makes the shoulder girdle disappear, but it disappears now in a different place on the chest wall, right? It's elevated, and the arm is disappeared in a different position. So you've got Larry's triangle rule holds true for that. You'd be so impressed that I quote him. No, probably. Oh, yeah, Larry. He's got a living ego. And then I ask you to use your hand to guide your head a little bit to the right. So some people were actually doing this. That's why I got you to do that. He didn't do that. So it's that, right? But I didn't want to say bending because his instructions very clearly, the right ear goes in the direction of the right shoulder. If you bend straight away, then of course the right shoulder keeps disappearing and you've got the partners, one chasing each other, and that's a marriage of disaster with their kind of come back, I'm chasing, but maybe that's okay. So you just got to be a bit free about that one. All right? And then then he directs your attention actually to what's happening in your pelvis, and then to the changing length to your right side, in that order. Do that and just feel that. So and then you can muck around. So just try and do it without moving your pelvis. You all moved your pelvis almost immediately. You will not see that in a class, in my humble opinion. And almost all of you, your little ischial tuberosities were popping up. Okay, now let your pelvis be free to move. It's not meant to be you're in the twist. You're in the twist at your self-decided range. So you stay in the twist and then you do this. So why? What's this got to do with anything? What's happening? Because of the constraint, you move your ribs in that side bending fashion, and who cares? Yes, yep. So it starts to show you that you have got mobility in the chest, because up until now, right, we've frozen the chest, haven't we? This kind of freezes the chest. So now we start to get some dynamic business happening. We start to feel that our ribs are slightly individual. So that's one thing. And if people are holding their breath by freezing their ribs, did that help you, Mr. Hold My Breath by Freezing My Ribs person? No. It didn't show you that you were holding there? Sorry? It didn't show you that you were holding there? So if, let's say, when I'm getting a little bit, at my end of range, and I do freeze my ribs, like Glenn said that you can. So this is my pattern of holding, is that I make my ribs get sticky and stay still. And then someone asks me to do this, it might, in my language, shine a torch on this ribs going, oh, yeah, I hold my ribs. Do that. Oh, right. And now I can breathe more fully. Right? So it might help with the breathing. Yeah? What else? We've actually said it, but what else is it doing? What picked up your pelvis? Where's the movement happening when you pick up your pelvis more? Opposite hip, this hip. So even more, I'm highlighting that the pelvis, this is Anastasia's thing, is the pelvis is free to move in this direction. But it's an interesting direction, right? It's not just up and down like that, just in pure side bending. Put your hand on your hip and feel where it goes. Yeah, it's up and around.
What would you say to someone if you noticed in a class that like someone was sitting there that and just doing that? How would you?
They will be doing that. Yeah, so then you might say, and I think he does, you might say, you know, can you sense the distance between the floor and your right butt cheek or your right sit bone? Is it moving with that position? Is that moving with that instruction? Yep. What else could you do? If someone is just recalcitrant, their pelvis is frozen.
Move your pelvis towards your shoulder.
Yeah, or can you lift it off? Can it move away from the floor a little bit? That's because that's the movement, is it's moving away from the floor a little bit. Or can you feel your weight shifting? So if your pelvis is frozen to the floor like this, just everybody do it, freeze your pelvis. So you've got weight more on two sit bones. So this is, someone said the very first day there's difference between rolling and lifting or something like this. Or pushing, I can't remember. But anyway, just feel this. What happens when as you turn, feel your weight shift under your bottom. Like really feel the weight shift. What starts picking up off the floor and what starts pushing more into the floor, right? So any of those things you could describe. Like I can feel my weight going from more like my coccyx, and then I would start really feeling my left ischial tuberosity, right? Maybe for me, this is for me, because I'm so bony. No, buns of steel. Yes? And now it keeps shifting your weight as you're thinking about turning. Feel how your weight shifts over and now to the other side of the sit bone. And now actually I'm almost ending up on my greater trochanter. Yeah? Now you can't use that language with the public because look, I always teach people to find their sit bones. So you can use a language like that, sitting, find your sit bones. It's such an important landmark for knowing where your pelvis is in terms of tilt. And then this weight shift. Greater trochanter, you don't need to tell people that because it's the side of your hip, right? Feel how your weight shifts over to the side of your hip. So you can either focus on the feedback from the ground if this gets lost, or what else happens that I might feel? They might feel here more. So in order for their pelvis to pick up, they might feel, can you feel your pelvis coming more towards your shoulder, or what else do you feel that you could say? Help Glenn out here. Yeah, you can just say lift it.
And then maybe then you go, oh, I think that's so maybe if I have that in my mind.
Yep. You could notice that what happens in your right thigh. Yep. So I think sorry?
The line between my floor and line.
Could use an image like that. Yep. Yep.
Is it a metaphor like an accordion or a slinky?
Yep. Yep.
You'd be so extreme as to say flip your pelvis?
Flip. Now, flip is an interesting word. So I used to say to my clients, giving them advice, I just flip over. And they started to say, and especially the just, because it's diminutive, it's like, and they were, I reckon several times in a row, they said, Susan, if I could flip, I wouldn't be here. Because flip is flip, it's just, and if someone has a sense of movement being easy, they can flip. And you want them to have that ease. If somebody is really struggling with movement, really struggling, you say flip, they will seriously want that, they'll want to shove their fingers up your nose because they can't. Like flip isn't in their repertoire. So it is interesting, You have to use this language depending on your class. Yeah.
I would say allow your hip participate.
Allow your hip to participate. It's very jargony, very jargony. Allow your hip to participate is a big heap of jargon, and you'll get away with it in your class if you've trained them to understand what hip means and what participate means. And even the allow, because people don't even, allow your, don't understand your. So again, I'm being hypercritical of your language here, but you can see why we start, this is the same when we're teaching in physio school and stuff. We teach people all this incredibly ornate language around anatomy and movement, and then we send them out to work with clients, and they have to back translate into real language again. You guys have to do the same thing. But it's much more insidious in here that we've picked up all this allow to participate, notice your spine, all these shorthand words, shorthand phrases, and you go and say them to the general public and they'll say, what the hell are you talking about? Participate in what? Hop up on the table. Yeah, pop.
I think even say scapula. Like I should just say breastbone.
It's not, because that wouldn't be right. That would be wrong. Shoulder blade. Yeah.
I'd say breast.
All right. In Australia, we don't like to say breast. We buy chicken fillets. We don't buy breasts. We buy fillets. Pardon? I call it sternum, but you can say breastbone. I'm teasing Ray because he likes it. He doesn't like it. Sorry?
Right.
What?
I don't think a lot of women would know what their breastbone was. They might think it's their breast.
All right. You don't know. Yeah. So do you know sternum? You do now.
Does the average public know sternum?
I don't think the average public even knows that there's a bone there.
Yeah.
I think that actually they don't know.
So what would you do? Just punch them?
Yeah. Yeah. You break it. If you break it for them, very highlighting. And this is where in your class you can really help people by actually teaching them some anatomy, and it's not the anatomy of the textbook, teaching them their skeleton. Yeah, and they find their own little notchy thing here, and they find their little bumpy bit here, and they feel it. They love it. People love it. They love to learn about their bodies. We in academic circles, there's this sort of online journal called The Conversation. If they have an article about bodies, human bodies and health, it has hits like in the thousands up to, one of my colleagues just wrote when it got over 1 million hits. Anything else, the lawyers at uni they were laughing at us, they get like 50,000 hits. As soon as it's to do with the body, hundreds of thousands of hits. People are so fascinated by their bodies. What they put in them, what they take out of them, all that stuff. They're so fascinated by it. And if you give them that, they'll think you're marvellous. And it doesn't have to have the fancy words, because that can really put people off. Just like in here, if we use it, it can really turn people off. It can make their muscle tone go up. And I'm a bit naughty sometimes and I forget. But you're right, shoulder blade. People don't even know they've got a shoulder blade. It's somewhere back there. Huh?
Or that it moves.
That it moves. They don't know. They don't know. They don't know it intellectually, and they don't know it experientially. They don't know either. It's phenomenal. Yeah. Phenomenal. Yes, you can. Where's the box?
Getting people to lift their hip up like that.
Yes.
I often ask them to put both hands on the other side of the left leg.
Yep.
And to turn around and just see if there's a $50 note under their bum.
Under their bum. Yes. You've just answered the question for the... Yeah. Yeah, it did.
That's an emergency. That's like...
Yes.
It's a non-fail method.
Did you feel that? Do it. Right? That's the last move. Yeah, and with that added thing that I didn't say that Fran said is see that you've got something under your bum, or can you see that you can say something really rude. Don't say something really rude. Can you see your bum?
Do you find a big difference between men and women in this? Because I can't sit like that at all.
Yeah, with your bum down.
So the idea of the hip being stuck in that position just doesn't compute.
Yeah, Yona is saying the same thing. So it's not a female-male thing. It's a hip joint thing.
Yes.
Right? This is hip joint stuff. We're saying the pelvis is moving. The movement is in the hip joint. The movement of the pelvis in the hip joint. Right? If the pelvis moves within itself, it hurts like shit. It's happened to me. It really, you can't walk, right? It's bust, because it's a ring. So when we say, with our language, the pelvis is moving through space, but the movement is in the hip joint. So this lesson is all actually about clarifying the hip joints. Yeah. 2 hip joints, exactly 2 hip joints. Because, very good point, Jen, as we're going around, what is happening for the pelvis to have that funny trajectory, feel what's happening in both hip joints at the same time. It's equal and opposite in a way. Yep, so they're both rotating. One's rotating in and one's rotating out relatively. One is getting more flexed and one's getting more extended. One's closing over more, so the hip that you're coming over is actually more flexed, more bent, and this one behind you is extending more. This is such a beautiful movement. It's so complicated. And it can be very different for people one side to the other because of this business in the hips. All right, this one's really churned out, this one's really churned in, this one's extending, this one's flexing, and then we're zipping over. Yeah, and we're also going from a backward tilt to a forward tilt. So we're going from the back of the joints into the front of the joints. Yes. Yep. So what's happening in the lumbar spine as you go round? Extending. Feel like it's straightening, and then for some people it will go beyond, like you increase your lordosis. Yeah. And then what's happening in the thorax for most people, and this is where Fran's trick in this business. So some people keep going around and their thorax will keep flexing, right?
And they'll spiral down.
They'll spiral down. Now, hopefully with the hand up here, it's another reason for the hand here, it keeps them going up. So feel what happens to your thorax, the chest part of your spine, because you've got the constraint of keeping your eyes to the horizon actually, but this is now the false horizon, yes? I'm giving you all the clues now because it's lunchtime. Feel what happens in your, which direction your chest is moving. So it's turning and, it's rotating and extending, straightening, right? Put your arm down and you'll feel like if your arm's just trailing, you can just rotate down into yourself. Feel that? Feel the difference? And your head can go down. But as soon as your arm's up or your arm's on the top of your head, or when you're here with Fran's move and you have to look over, then that really helps clarify that that's lengthening all through your spine. Oh, I didn't know my bum looked like that. Does my bum look big in that movement? Yes? You could do that. You could do that. You could do that. Yep. You have to try. Because the answer to that, will it confuse them? You have to try. And think about our questions are experiments. They're not surefire winners, right? They're an experiment. They're saying, if you try this, does it make a difference? If you try that, does it make a difference? So not all of these things are surefire winners for anybody. So one will really speak to someone, the rest will mean nothing to them. It won't make any difference. You live with that. That's how it is. That's why there's so many variations. Because some of them will work and some of them won't, and that will be different across the room. And it's a question of them asking what you're interested in. Can they figure out for themselves what helps or not? And it's not intellectual. You don't give them a checklist. But they'll feel it. What do you feel? What makes a difference that they can feel? Because that's what you're practicing, is the feeling of the difference. Because actually, who cares if you can do this? Well, actually, it's very nice. It's very good to be able to wipe, because you can help wipe your bum more doing that. If you can do that, you can wipe your bum easier. So there are some other benefits of doing the movement. But what you're really interested is for them learning how to feel when they're better or not. Punchline.
So it's really good for getting out of the car.
Really good for getting out of the car. Really good for getting the seatbelt. Really good.
The attitude some people have for actually moving pelvis, what you were talking about before. I've had 2 women.
You've had 2 women. That's it. Put a full stop there, and that's a beautiful statement, Glenn. Thank you. Yes.
So, one was doing the sitting, pushing through, and another one was we were just practicing before. Sorry.
I don't have to review.
We just practicing. We were just practicing before an ATM, just doing the hand turning, and both of them, when I was talking about the pelvis, both of them turned around and said pretty much the same thing. That, oh, isn't that cheating? Like moving the pelvis to turn around was cheating. It's like, well, I don't know. Is it cheating in life? I don't know. Like, how did that come up to moving your pelvis is cheating? So, yeah, is it?
Well, and it comes from a place of there's a right and a wrong, and only one way to do it.
Yeah.
And we are about smashing that assumption, about feel for yourself what is the best. If the function is to turn, what is the best way to turn? If you think this is the best way to turn, good for you. I'll see you at the chiropractor's next week.
Yeah, but just to give your clients some respect, you know, we all come here open-minded, wanting to engage, and we know that Feldenkrais involves constraints. So sometimes we just assume that's part of the constraint, and that's happened to me as well.
Yeah, it's a cultural constraint. It's a cultural constraint that you can explore.
But if you just don't, if the person thinks there are no constraints, they won't be doing Feldenkrais, will they?
So there's a long talk here, and this is very rich discussion. I've probably lost almost all of you because it's 1:15. Don't. Constraint is not a bad word. If our brain didn't constrain things, we would be jellyfish and we would not survive, right? The only reason we survive is we can constrain things. We can otherwise there are too many details to do. So I work with little kids who are very ataxic, for example, or have they've just got this kind of wildly dystonic activity happening. They can't constrain their movements. They are non-functional in this world. They have to learn constraints. If we don't constrain ourselves, we don't function. We can't posture against gravity, right? We can't be accurate. So constraint is not something to get rid of. It's something to work with judiciously, right? So why we make the decisions to constrain or not constrain is an interesting question. So this is a room where constraint is not a dirty word. We are systems thinkers. Constraints are more important to us than the opposite, to be honest, right? Otherwise, we've got too many degrees of freedom and we're just windmills tilting everywhere. That's what I'm going to end on right now because it's lunchtime. Okay? Cooked. I think we've done the rude mechanicals enough, have we? It's 1:15. That's terrible. 2:30.
That constraint thing is also interesting philosophically as well, where you go working creatively within boundaries.
It's always boundaries.
There's
always.
a very interesting